Bonjour! Welcome in again. This is another episode of Musings from the Mountains. I am Keenan Cummings, a managing editor for WVSports.com with the Rivals Network.
And I'm Patrick Kotnik, staff writer for WVSports.com of the Rivals Network.
As promised, we're back again. We're going to preview the NC State game for you. Before we get into that, West Virginia released a depth chart. Actually, what would you say, Pat, an hour after we posted our podcast?
Yeah, about an hour or two.
Yeah, we discussed that changes were coming. Some changes did come on the depth chart. Bryson Mays is now listed at the top with the or. And you're always got to include the or on these depth charts, but
It's typical.
he's listed as your starting center, and somewhat of a surprise. Not that he's there, just that how he's elevated his play. He's a guy that coming into the spring, you thought that he had a chance to have that job. Chase Barrett really kind of wrestled it away from him. Quote the wrestler, forget the wrestling pun because he was a wrestler, but he did. He wrestled it away from him. I think that Bryson has put himself back in the picture. The thing that Matt Moore said is he's snapping the ball better. He's playing more physical. I think there's a chance that he could be your guy come Saturday.
And he's someone that a lot of you guys on the Blue Lot have asked about. Where is Bryson? Where is he in terms of the depth chart? Well, now you have your answer. He's found himself well in the mix, and he definitely has a chance to start on Saturday now.
Yeah, and it goes back to that Monday Night Football thing we talked about a little bit. They had the Monday night practice. It used to be Thursday under Dana. Now they get the young guys out there and see what can happen. Some other young guys that are going to play. Wide receivers, Winston Wright at that inside slot. He's going to play. Neil's already made that clear. Ollie Jennings is going to play on the outside. Jordan Jefferson moved up a spot. He was your third-team nose tackle. He's now your second-team nose tackle. So I expect you're going to see a bigger role from him, as Neil kind of alluded to. Diamante Lindsay, he's playing two positions now. A little bit of Bandit and a little bit of Will. So it'll be interesting to see what other shakeups come. There's still some time now between now and when the game starts, and I think West Virginia's going to continue to try to increase the competition, get different looks, and get some guys in there that simply are going to play better than what West Virginia's had so far.
And that's something that Matt Morris said yesterday, is that you can't expect to have the same guys in there and for things to change. They're going to get some fresh faces out there. They're going to give guys opportunities, and whether or not these guys take advantage of these opportunities remains to be seen. But it should be fun. I'm looking forward to see who exactly gets in and what kind of impact they can have.
I'm looking forward even more to the pregame scramble when they're out there with no pads on warming up, and we're trying to figure out who's where. Yeah, we're trying to figure out who's where. So that's what I'm more excited for. 11th meeting all time, West Virginia and NC State have not played since 2010. You might remember that game. Unfortunately for West Virginia, it was the Russell Wilson show. They won 23-7 in the Champ Sports Bowl. NC State's won the last 3 games in the series. They haven't played every year, obviously, but a little bit of momentum there, if you want to call it that. This is going to be kind of a litmus test, a gauging a game for both of these teams. West Virginia needs the rebound. I think that's clear after playing, if you want to be brutally honest, terrible at Missouri. And NC State hasn't really had a challenge. I've talked to NC State writers, that our guys over at the Wolfpacker do an excellent job. And they don't really know what they have on this team. It's a young team. They played 20 first-time players in their opener. There's a lot of questions. I think that's going to be interesting to see how they fare on the road. It's the first road trip. Morgantown is not an easy place to play. I know if you look at the scores, NC State's absolutely dominated East Carolina and Western Carolina, but I think you'd expect that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. NC State may not have, they may not have had that one true test. And I'm not going to say West Virginia will be their biggest test of the season, but it's really their first. I don't know, would you say real test first? You're
going to find out about them.
You're going to find out a lot about them. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly like when we found out about West Virginia last week.
The main takeaway here is that if we're against East Carolina, against Western Carolina, they took care of business and did so convincingly, outscoring their opponents 75-6, and they have not allowed a touchdown so far this season.
Only team in college football to do that outside of Wisconsin. So regardless of who you're playing, they're playing well. I think that is going to be tested. I know West Virginia fans out there are still kind of licking their wounds a little bit, thinking about what's going to happen this weekend. But I do think West Virginia is going to come back. They're going to play better football at home. We'll get to our predictions later in the show, but let's look at some of the things about this matchup that are intriguing. First of all, West Virginia's absolute weakness is running the football. NC State's absolute strength is stopping the run. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to me. NC State, they've been dominating so far. I think they only allow 24 yards a game. West Virginia is next to last in college football, 32 yards per game. The only team they're in front of is, coincidentally enough, Texas State, where old friend Jake Spavital is the head coach. So West Virginia's been miserable on the ground. 1.14 yards per carry. I think Patrick could sometimes fall forward for more than that. I'm joking a little bit, but a lot of negative plays. That's what's happening in the run game. West Virginia's wasn't. They were getting fitted up in the first game, but they weren't blocking guys.
And that's the thing. They haven't really put it all together. You mentioned JMU. Matt Morris said, they had hats. They were more worried about getting hats on hats, being more assignment sound, which they were. They were assignment sound. They just weren't coming off the ball. Now, against Missouri, you had almost the exact opposite happening, where they're coming off the ball, since that was a big emphasis, but there was no technique. They were missing defenders. They couldn't. As soon as they made contact, they weren't driving them, and then you had a lot of defenders going unblocked at the point of contact, which you can't have.
And this isn't just an offensive line problem. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I think Neil's talked about this. The running backs have not played well. No one is going to tell you that the running backs have played well.
And blocking needs to improve too. When it comes to tight ends,
especially with the perimeter blocking. I think if all the things that surprised me. I mean, if you've read my columns since last spring, offensive line has been my biggest concern. I got some blowback about that on the message boards, and people were talking about some of the guys returning, and it's one of those things where I had to see it to believe it. And did I think it'd be this bad? Absolutely not. But the shocking part to me is not the offensive line, how bad they're playing, of course, but the perimeter blocking from the wide receivers. I thought that was a strength for West Virginia last year. I know there's some turnover, but there's some guys there that played pretty well in that department, like TJ Simmons and some others that are not doing their job right now. And I think Neil has made that pretty clear. You got to see improvement there. That's why you're seeing some of these young guys that are going to get snaps. If West Virginia cannot win these one-on-one matchups, either up front or on the outside, it's going to be a very long day and, for the better part, a very long year for West Virginia. Some storylines here that are interesting in this game. The return of Voldemort himself, if you listen to Vic Koenig, Tony Gibson. He spent 13 years at West Virginia over 2 stints, was recently the defensive coordinator, had some success in Morgantown, grew up a Mountaineer fan, bleeds it, obviously, was not retained after the coaching change. So it's going to be interesting. I think those kind of storylines get a lot of play, but once the game starts, I don't think that'll matter too much. He will have, obviously, some insight into personnel. He recruited all these guys. Mm-hmm. They all know him. For the most part, other than the true freshmen or the junior college editions, he knows pretty much everybody on the defense. So I'm interested to see what they do. The one thing I thought was really kind of intriguing is NC State has switched. They've gone from a 4-down front to a 3-down front, and talking with people that cover the Wolfpack, they're using a lot of 3-3-5 principles. So it's the old 3-3-5 stack that so many people didn't like too much here in Morgantown. Going to be rolling in and seeing what they can do against Austin Kendall and company. North Carolina State hasn't played a lot of Big 12 teams, but they have won their last 4. Last time they won a non-conference road game, though, against a Power 5 opponent, was Texas Tech, and that was all the way back in 2002.
Wow.
So I think that's going to be interesting to see how they fare. How do they fare? How does West Virginia respond? That's the question of the week. We know West Virginia's deficiencies. We know where West Virginia has to get better. Can they get better? Can this be rectified this year? Can the foundation be laid going forward?
And like you said, we're going to find out about what each team is made of too. We mentioned NC State, the Wolfpack. This is kind of like their first almost, true test of the year after blowing out their first 2 opponents. And it was West Virginia, their first true taste of adversity. Like I said, I know they had adversity against James Madison, but now playing against better opponents, it's a whole different animal. So whether or not they can rebound from that blowout loss to Missouri and actually fix some of these departments like the run game, they can be better at linebacker, they can wrap up and tackle, not have so many missed tackles. They had 21, 22 against Missouri, so those are all question marks right now.
And this is a game that's interesting too from a recruiting perspective, because these 2 teams, you wouldn't believe it how much they recruit against each other. Yeah. Matthew McKay, he was a West Virginia offer, a West Virginia guy that they recruited. You go up and down the list. I do something every week on the site that if you haven't checked out, I recommend you do it. Kind of guys that West Virginia once recruited on the opposing team. This one's loaded. I had to leave some guys off just because they were just barely recruited. I mean, I've got a list of guys this week that is just full of players that West Virginia once recruited and really wanted on the recruiting trail. They're now playing for the Wolfpack. So this could be kind of one of those plant your flag type of games as well. Just a little bit about on the recruiting trail because these two teams cross paths more than you would expect. We're gonna get to our predictions. As I said, I think that West Virginia, they've got to rebound. I think that goes without saying. When you look at this NC State team, they haven't thrown the ball down the field a lot. Playing it more safe. Matthew McKay's took care of the football. He's done his job there. They've got a stable of tight ends, running backs, wide receivers. They're young, but they can get them the football. We've already talked about defensively that they do a lot of things up front to stop the run. They're pretty good in the corner spot. But other than that, I think it's time that we transition a little bit and take some of your questions, as we do every week. And I'm kind of excited this week, Patrick. I like to see what people have cooking for us.
All right. Can you smell what the Rock is cooking?
There you go.
Perfect transition. But first question here, Keenan. Quarterback rumors. Is there anyone that's going to leave, or could there possibly be a new starter?
If there's a new starter, it's a state secret. I think the way that Neil Brown, I think if one thing you can take away from this coaching staff is they've been very upfront when it comes to dealing with things. Neil told us from day one that when this team looks bad, it's bad. Mm-hmm. And you saw that at Missouri. It was bad. He's talked about the deficiencies with some of his players. He's talked about areas that have to get better. And you're seeing this play out on the field. That tells me that he's telling you how it is. He's really kind of talked up Austin Kendall. I know that some people out there are disappointed with his performance at Missouri, but the guy didn't really have a chance. He was getting hit all the time.
A lot of penetration.
And a lot of penetration from the defensive line. West Virginia cannot run the ball. There's not many quarterbacks in college football that if they're not getting any semblance of a run game and they cannot throw the ball due to not having the time to do it, are going to be productive. It's just a simple fact of football. And the stat that I go back to just blows my mind. He was hit 8 times on the first 16 snaps. 8 times. I don't think there's going to be a quarterback change right now. I think that they're going to see what Kendall can do. I think this is a big week for him. As for anybody leaving, I think at the end of the year, there's probably going to be somebody leaving. I would be surprised if it happens now. It wouldn't make a lot of sense. If you talk about a guy like Jack Allison, sure, he could put his name in the transfer portal, but if he would leave right now, he's basically forfeiting a year of eligibility. He has no red shirt, and you're just giving it up on the off chance that you're not going to play when anybody that's ever followed college football knows you're one injury away from getting in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I know we said Jack Allison only played, one series against Missouri.
Was not a good one.
Was not a good one. Pick 6 there. Trey Lowe got 1 or 2 snaps there at the end. So, like I said, I believe that Kendall's still the guy, barring another, like I said, he didn't really have a chance, but I'd say if he has that bad of a performance, maybe, but I fully anticipate they're going to stick with Kendall as their guy. Like I said, Brown has spoke really highly of him. Next question here. Notice Brown said they have 1 year to build a foundation. Does that mean he expects to win next year?
I think when he said foundation, it means a culture.
Yeah.
Not necessarily we're going to win 10 games next year. I think that's the goal, obviously, but it's about building. Right now, it's something that caught me in fall camp that Neil said is that when they took graduate transfers, it's not that they took less talented guys, but they had to find locker room fits because they're trying to change the way things are in the program. And this is a telling week for West Virginia. We go back to this again. They got kicked in the mouth, and it wasn't pretty. It was bad. And now how does this young team respond? They have some veterans. This is the foundation. This is what Neil talks about when he's talking about building a culture. He doesn't want a soft football team. Yeah, they might not be the best football team on their schedule this year, but he wants them to give effort, he wants them to try, and he wants them to bounce back. I think those are the things he's talking about when he talks about foundation.
And then we talk on the topic of a foundation too. It's also important. A big emphasis for him is building that foundation off of the football field. We've known from talking to recruits over the summer, even over the spring, since Brown got hired, is that whenever these recruits and whenever these targets speak to any of these coaches on the coaching staff, a lot of times they said, we didn't even talk about football. They really talk about they get their families involved, They talk to their siblings. They talk about what they want to do and for life after football. So you mentioned that on the field, culture they want to establish, but there's also a strong emphasis on off the field as well. Wanted to point that out. But next question here is, going into Game 3, have you seen any improvements from any specific player standing out on both sides of the ball?
I think the cornerbacks have played well. I really do. I think that was a concern for some people, especially moving Josh Norwood over. Akeem Bailey deserves some credit. I don't think there might not be any player that gets beat up more on the message boards and from fans on defense than him, and he's played excellent so far. Now he's going to be tested, obviously, moving forward, but I think he's played really well for West Virginia. And other than that, offensively, it's hard to pick out a guy. I think Colton McKivitz.
Yeah, exactly. I said one guy you can maybe single out is Colton McKivitz.
But it's offensive line. I mean, if all 5 guys aren't working in unison, it stands out. You have to.
You can maybe say Sam James too for a half.
I think Sam James made a big.
That's what they.
And I think George Campbell has played pretty well when he's been given the chance, but there's a lot of room to grow there. I think West Virginia's got to get better in all phases.
Now, next question here. Team is all about chemistry. Are you seeing a lack thereof?
No, I don't think chemistry is an issue. I think it's just more. West Virginia is a young football team with a lot of guys that are unproven and are growing up. I've seen a lot of people talk about the talent. West Virginia has some talent on the roster. It's just young. It's okay if you can get away with young talent when you're mixing it in with some veterans that have done it before. But look at the veterans on this team. Guys like Reuben Jones, guys like Austin Kendall, guys like George Campbell, guys that really haven't played. They're older, but they haven't played, so they're sort of figuring out things for themselves too. I don't sense that there's any issues with chemistry. I think that this team's together. I think that they want to do well. I don't think there's any kind of infighting or anything like that. I'm not worried in that department.
No, me either. I feel like there's a big emphasis on team, and like you said, this is heading into this year, this is a young, inexperienced team. You're gonna have these growing pains. It's just about and when Brown said they're bad is really bad. So there's been strong emphasis on improving that, obviously, but like I said, I don't think you can trace any of this back to chemistry at all. Last question here. Ranking order, we're going to talk about the offensive units: quarterbacks, running backs, offensive line, receivers, and tight ends. Ranking in order of performance through 2 games, 1 being the best and 5 being the worst.
That is hard. That is very
tough.
If I had, I'd probably go receivers first, although that's not a confident answer. I feel like blocking's been a concern. Then running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, offensive line. That would be probably my 5.
This is tough. I'd probably go receivers first. A lot of promise there. He said, none of these position groups have been perfect. Maybe quarterbacks then after that.
No, not perfect.
I don't know. And maybe tight ends, running backs, and offense, or maybe running backs then tight ends and then offensive line. I think that's a fair. I don't know. That's tough. Like I said, none of these position groups. Like I said, some of these players on some of these personnel groups have impressed. Some of these groups have shown flashes. There's just been a total lack of inconsistency.
Not a consistency. None
at all. That's tough, but that's a great question.
That is a good question. It got me thinking.
Yeah.
Got
me stumped.
I think that now we're to the point of the show that you've all been waiting for.
You go first this time.
We took a beating last week for picking Missouri. Now, we actually picked a close game, but I think West Virginia does rebound. I think they play better football. I'm not going to pick them to win. I can't. I have to see them be able to do this against a Power 5 team. Maybe it's this week. Maybe it's next week. I do think this team comes out and plays inspired at home. I think they're going to play better at home all year. That's part of being a young football team. I buy into the home environment. I think West Virginia's going to have a good crowd. NC State's going to win this game. I'm going to say 24-17 NC State. I do think it is going to be more of a defensive game. I know that NC State's had a lot of success offensively, but they have not really been challenged at all. I think the key to this game, to me, is what can West Virginia at all establish a run game to take some pressure off, And can NC State do something in the passing game down the field? Because they just have not thrown the ball down the field. They haven't had to, but they have not been able to throw the ball down the field this year. Those are my two keys.
I am also going to take NC State on this one by a score of 31-20. I really feel like West Virginia is going to be in it. You are going to see a lot of improvement from the Mountaineers this week. But I feel like the Wolfpack, they're going to get a late touchdown in there to seal it there at the end of the game. Like I said, I think my biggest keys, like Keenan said, is can West Virginia get movement up front? Can they establish a consistent run game? Like I said, NC State, their defense, they haven't allowed a rush longer than 12 yards so far through 2 games.
West Virginia hasn't had one over 6.
Exactly, and two of their top, their best rushes so far have 9 yards, 8 yards, both from wide receivers. Tevin Bush had a 9-yard gain, Sam James had an 8-yard gain. Is whether or not they can really establish that run game, give some movement off front. So I'm curious to see what happens also defensively, especially with the defensive line. Can they disrupt? Quarterback right there? And are they going to throw the ball down the field at all? You know what I'm saying? They haven't taken many chances downfield. He hasn't been exactly great when they take chances downfield. So I'm curious to see that matchup as well.
There it is. You have it. We will be back joining you after the game. Give us kind of a quick breakdown as we did last time. Hopefully the weather cooperates.
Hopefully none of us are sick.
Yes. Thank you once again for tuning in to Musings from the Mountains. We'll see you Saturday.